January 26, 1945, 2:20 p.m. In the frozen fields near Holzwihr, France, a scene unfolded that seemed to defy all probability. Amidst the smoke and deafening roar of battle, an American soldier, like a titan, stood atop a burning tank destroyer, methodically annihilating lines of advancing German troops. Elite mountain infantrymen of the 2nd Mountain Division, battle-hardened veterans hastily transferred from Norway for this offensive, were halted by a figure who appeared youthful and frail, weighing barely 110 pounds. Behind the enemy front line, 6 Panzer IV tanks and formidable tank destroyers, whose power had crushed resistance across Europe, remained hesitant. Their commanders, stunned by the unfolding events, dared not advance without infantry support, which a single American was relentlessly destroying. 250 soldiers of the reinforced German company faced a phenomenon that, according to all tactical doctrines of the Wehrmacht, was simply impossible. One soldier single-handedly holding a position against a massive combined arms assault. The odds were merciless: 40 exhausted Americans against 250 elite German mountain infantry, supported by 6 tanks. By all laws of military science, the American position should have fallen in a matter of minutes. Yet, for an incredible hour, 2nd Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy boldly rewrote the rules of war, demonstrating superhuman resilience and courage. The story of this extraordinary tank destroyer began in the vast cotton fields of Hunt County, Texas, where Audie Murphy was born on June 20th, 1925, into a family of impoverished sharecroppers. The 6th of 12 children, he faced the harsh realities of poverty and the burden of responsibility from a young age. When Audie was 12, his father abandoned the family, and in 1941 his mother died of endocarditis and pneumonia, leaving the 16-year-old as the sole provider for his younger siblings. "If I don't hit the target, my family goes hungry," young Murphy confided to his neighbor Monroe Hackney, explaining his phenomenal marksmanship. He possessed an uncanny gift for hitting a running rabbit at 50 yards with a .22 caliber rifle, a feat most people couldn't accomplish even against a barn. Every bullet was precious, and a miss meant empty stomachs. It was in these challenging conditions that Murphy honed his shooting talent, which would later strike terror into the hearts of German soldiers across 3 nations. After the tragic events at Pearl Harbor, Murphy saw the army as a chance to escape poverty. Service offered steady pay, full meals, and the opportunity to help his brothers and sisters. However, even joining up proved difficult for the young teenager. Standing a modest 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing only 110 pounds, Murphy was rejected by the Marines and the Navy for being too small. The Airborne also declined him. Ultimately, on June 30th, 1942, he was enlisted into the regular Army infantry after his sister Corinne provided a falsified birth certificate claiming he was already 18. At Camp Walters, Texas, where Private First Class David Mouse McClure underwent rigorous basic training alongside Murphy, there was widespread bewilderment. "At first, we all took him for a mascot," McClure recalled. "This kid, looking about 14, weighed next to nothing. The instructors never missed an opportunity to tease him, calling him baby." However, beneath the unassuming exterior lay something more profound. The moment he stepped onto the firing range, his blue eyes transformed, taking on a steely, chilling hue. He displayed astonishing accuracy, never missing a single shot. Murphy's transformation from a simple Texas farm boy into a relentless soldier began in July 1943, during the audacious invasion of Sicily. As part of Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, he landed in Licata, in the thick of Operation Husky, led by General Patton's 7th Army. In the rugged Sicilian mountains, Murphy confronted a grim truth about himself. He possessed a frightening talent for killing. His humble rural upbringing had endowed him with valuable skills: the ability to move silently, utilize terrain for cover, and strike targets with lightning precision. Near Palermo, when his unit came under heavy fire from an enemy machine gun, Private Murphy displayed exceptional cunning and bravery. He single-handedly outflanked the enemy position, eliminated the machine gun crew with accurately thrown grenades, and turned their own weapon against the retreating enemy forces. Captain Paul Harris, impressed by his actions, recommended Murphy for the Bronze Star, noting in his recommendation, "This soldier demonstrates an innate inclination for combat, which is exceptional for such a young and inexperienced man." The Italian campaign marked a turning point in Murphy's destiny, transforming him from a mere soldier into a legendary hero. In October 1943, during the crossing of the Volturno River, he displayed extraordinary courage, single-handedly holding off a German counterattack after his unit was virtually destroyed. Armed with a borrowed sniper rifle, Murphy eliminated 5 enemy soldiers from a distance exceeding 270 meters. For this feat, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Staff Sergeant William Polson described Murphy's combat tactics. Murph wouldn't let anger guide him in battle. That's what made him so terrifying. He operated cold and calculated, like he was solving a complex math problem. Spotted a German, took him out, moved to the next. No emotions, no hesitation, just deadly efficiency. In the bloody battles around Anzio, on the beachhead Winston Churchill dubbed Wildcat, Murphy was awarded his first Silver Star for destroying a German tank with a bazooka at close range. By the time of the invasion of southern France in August 1944, Murphy had endured the crucible of Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and Rome. He had been wounded twice, repeatedly decorated, and had earned a reputation among both American and German soldiers as a man to be feared. During the Allied advance through southern France, Sergeant Murphy displayed outstanding initiative and courage when his lieutenant fell victim to an ambush near Montélimar. Without losing his composure, Murphy took command of the platoon. Demonstrating tactical prowess, he organized the defense with just 18 men against a superior German company numbering over 100 soldiers. For 2 hours, Murphy and his few warriors heroically held a strategically important crossroads, with the sergeant personally eliminating 15 enemies. For his leadership and bravery, Murphy was promoted to second lieutenant directly on the battlefield on October 14, 1944. By January 1945, as Company B approached the Colmar Pocket, Murphy was no longer the young recruit he had been when he joined the army in 1942. The war had left an indelible mark on his face, aging him despite his youth. He had witnessed the death or wounding of most of his comrades with whom he had begun his combat journey. He personally accounted for over 100 enemy soldiers killed. The Colmar Pocket was the embodiment of winter warfare's horrors, a vast German bridgehead of 850 square miles west of the Rhine. It was the last piece of French soil remaining under Wehrmacht control. Hitler had ordered it held at all costs. The Germans had fortified the area with their best remaining units, including the 2nd Mountain Division, specially trained for winter combat in Norway. The situation for Company B at that time could be described as critical. In the 5 days of fierce clashes preceding January 26, 1945, the unit had suffered significant losses, with 102 men wounded. Virtually all officers except Murphy were out of action due to death or evacuation. Originally staffed with 187 soldiers, the company retained only about 40 combat-ready personnel. Murphy himself, despite having sustained a shrapnel wound to his leg 2 days prior, continued to lead the company, concealing his injury from those around him. Private Anthony Abramsky described the prevailing conditions. "We were exhausted to the limit, completely worn out. Many of us hadn't slept for 3 days. We ate cold rations when we could eat anything at all. Half the personnel suffered from frostbite. Our machine guns failed due to the cold. All night long we tried to dig some semblance of trenches, but the ground was hard as rock. At dawn, looking at our positions stretched along the edge of the forest with an open field before us, we realized we were an easy target. January 26, 1945 was a grey and bleak day. The air temperature hovered around freezing, and a biting wind penetrated even the warmest clothing. Snow cover reached up to 3 feet in places, yet incessant artillery fire had transformed much of the terrain into a moonscape of frozen mud and ice. Company B, under Lieutenant Murphy's command, occupied strategically important positions on the edge of the Bois de Riedvier forest, overlooking an open plain stretching almost a mile, beyond which lay the German-held village of Holzwehr. Murphy, understanding the vulnerability of his weakened company, took measures to maximize their defense. He had 2 M10 tank destroyers at his disposal, representing their only anti-tank capability. Infantrymen were spread along the tree line, forming a thin but resilient defensive line. The command post was set up in a drainage ditch, providing relative protection and an excellent view of the terrain, allowing for quick reactions to approaching threats. Field telephone lines connected the command post to supporting artillery batteries, which was their only real hope of stopping the imminent enemy attack. At 1 p.m., German forces began a massive artillery bombardment. Shells exploding in the treetops rained down a deadly hail of shrapnel on Company B's positions. Those who survived this hellish barrage felt those agonizing 30 minutes stretch into an eternity. At 2 p.m., the German attack shifted into its active phase. Private First Class Donald Ekman was the first to spot the enemy, exclaiming in horror. German tank pennants were flying on the antennas. 6 tanks, lined up in battle formation, were advancing on us. And behind them, my God, about 250 infantrymen in white camouflage suits moved across the field like ghosts, blending with the snow. In that critical moment, as German forces, like locusts, advanced on the American positions, Murphy wasted no time. His first action was to request artillery support, understanding that it was impossible to hold back the enemy's onslaught alone. However, the artillery fire could not stop the avalanche of advancing German soldiers. They were everywhere, spread across the terrain, their numbers far superior to the Americans, and they moved with relentless speed. At a distance of about 550 meters from the enemy, the American M10 tank destroyers opened fire, but the initial shots were inaccurate. The crews, exhausted from long battles and stiff with cold, struggled with aiming. The German tanks immediately returned fire, and it was devastating. One 80mm shell struck the rear of an M10, hitting directly into the turret. The tank destroyer instantly burst into flames, and the crew, saving their lives, abandoned the vehicle and took cover in the nearby forest. The other M10, attempting to gain a better firing position, slid into a drainage ditch, its tracks losing traction on the icy ground. The crew of this vehicle was also forced to retreat, leaving it on the battlefield. Approximately at 2:20 p.m., with both tank destroyers disabled and German infantry closing to within just 180 meters, Murphy made a decision that would later earn him the highest military honor, the Medal of Honor. He ordered his remaining soldiers to fall back to prepared positions in the forest, but he himself stayed put. Instead of fleeing, Murphy, risking his life, ran under artillery fire toward the burning M10 tank destroyer. The vehicle was engulfed in flames from the rear, where the 80mm shell hit had caused an explosion of fuel and ammunition. Thick black smoke billowed from the hull, and the heat from the fire was palpable from about 30 feet away. At any moment, the remaining ammunition could detonate, turning the vehicle into a deadly bomb. Lieutenant Murphy, without losing a second, climbed onto the tank destroyer, taking his place behind the M2 Browning heavy machine gun. From this elevated vantage point, he had an unobstructed view of the advancing German troops. However, he was completely exposed, a lone figure silhouetted against the sky, devoid of any cover save for the smoke rising from the blazing vehicle beneath him. Private First Class Anthony Abramsky, watching from behind the trees, recalled, "I saw Lieutenant Murphy climb onto that burning tank destroyer while bullets whistled all around. Incoming infantry fire lashed against the hull and tracks of the vehicle. It was the most incredible display of bravery and courage I had ever witnessed." The M2 Browning machine gun, a devastating force in skilled hands, is capable of firing 550 rounds per minute, engaging targets up to 2,000 meters away. Its 50 caliber rounds easily penetrate light armor and inflict horrific wounds on enemy personnel. In Murphy's hands, this weapon became an instrument of precise annihilation. For the next hour, Murphy expertly wielded the heavy machine gun, demonstrating incredible effectiveness. Throughout the engagement, he maintained communication with artillery support, directing fire in close proximity to his own position. The combination of his machine gun fire and accurate artillery support created an impenetrable wall of steel that the German infantry could not overcome. Sergeant Elmer Broley, observing the battle from cover at the edge of the forest, noted with astonishment, "German soldiers relentlessly approached Lieutenant Murphy's position just 10 yards away, but he continued to destroy them in the trenches, in the open, in the dense woods, everywhere he could reach." The circumstances in which Murphy found himself made his courage even more outstanding. The frozen ground made it difficult to create reliable fortifications. Intermittent cloud cover would occasionally dissipate, opening up visibility, only to be replaced by a dense veil of fog. The biting cold seized up weapon mechanisms and caused frostbite among soldiers exhausted from days of continuous fighting. However, Murphy's position on the M10 provided him with undeniable advantages that he skillfully exploited. The self-propelled gun, situated on a slight elevation, offered an excellent view of the German line of advance and allowed him to control a vast area. The effective range of the .50 caliber machine gun, reaching 2,000 meters, enabled him to engage targets at maximum distance, and the smoke screen from the burning vehicle hindered accurate return fire from the enemy. German forces found themselves in an extremely disadvantageous tactical situation. Their tanks, counting on overwhelming the weakened American position, were unable to advance without infantry support. Support that Murphy was methodically destroying. Wehrmacht military doctrine emphasized combined arms cooperation, and in the absence of infantry cover, the tanks were forced to retreat to avoid the risk of being cut off from the main forces and destroyed in close combat. Sergeant Maurice Wald, meticulously observing the battlefield from the battalion command post through his binoculars, later recalled the incredible effectiveness of Murphy's fire. According to the sergeant, it wasn't just indiscriminate firing, but a series of precise measured shots. Murphy coolly eliminated German soldiers as if on a training range. Wald witnessed Murphy single-handedly wipe out an entire enemy squad attempting to flank the American positions. Approximately at 3:12 p.m., after 40 minutes of continuous firing, Murphy's ammunition began to run low. The machine gun barrel glowed red hot. The tank destroyer, engulfed in flames, was gradually sinking into the ground under the weight of melted tracks and road wheels. German infantry relentlessly advanced, closing the distance to 10 yards. Private Charles Owen recalled how the formidable fire of the .50 caliber machine gun began to dwindle due to lack of ammunition. Noticing this, the German soldiers made a desperate attempt to break through. Murphy, without losing his composure, grabbed his carbine and continued to shoot down the pressing enemy. Around 3:10 p.m., with his ammunition almost depleted and German infantry at point-blank range, Murphy made the riskiest decision of his life. He ordered the artillery to open fire directly on his own position. The forward observer, Lieutenant Walter Wyszczewski, initially refused to comply, understanding that it would inevitably lead to Murphy's death. However, Murphy was adamant. "I am giving you a direct order. Fire on my position immediately." The first enemy shells exploded just 50 yards from the blazing tank destroyer, sending up fountains of frozen earth and deadly shrapnel. German infantrymen who had rashly found themselves in the open instantly turned into piles of bloody flesh, yet Murphy himself, perched atop the steel vehicle, was in mortal danger. Sharp fragments pierced his leg, marking his second wound of the day, but he, disregarding the pain, continued to fire his last remaining rounds. Murphy's furious fire, combined with the artillery barrage unleashed upon the enemy, broke the German offensive. The surviving infantrymen, numbering about 100, began a disorganized retreat toward Holzwihr. The tanks, there deprived of infantry support and subjected to increasingly accurate artillery fire, turned back and hastily withdrew. Approximately at 3:20 p.m., after an hour of continuous and fierce combat, Murphy abandoned the flaming M10. His uniform was scorched by the heat, and blood streamed from shrapnel wounds on his leg. The tank destroyer continued to burn, and 10 minutes after the hero's evacuation, a powerful explosion occurred. The scene that met his gaze was horrifying. The snow-covered fields were littered with German bodies. Military historians estimated the enemy lost about 50 soldiers killed and significantly more wounded. The demoralized Germans retreated, and their officers were unable to organize a new attack. Murphy returned to the edge of the forest, where his comrades awaited him. According to Private Abramsky, he remained cool-headed, even eerily so. After confirming no losses from the artillery barrage and ensuring everyone was all right, he calmly sat down and lit a cigarette, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. His hands didn't even tremble. One of the most striking aspects of the historical record of this event is the near-complete absence of German eyewitness accounts. Despite extensive searches in German military archives, federal archives, and veterans' organizations, no specific statements, diary entries, or prisoner-of-war testimonies from German soldiers concerning Murphy's actions have been found in available historical sources. This silence is particularly noteworthy given the fierce nature of the battle and the shock it must have caused among the attacking enemy forces. Several explanations account for this gap in documentation. The German units involved in the engagement suffered significant casualties, approximately 50 men from Murphy's actions alone, likely leading to the deaths of many potential witnesses. Furthermore, Wehrmacht divisional-level documentation for this period was often destroyed in the final months of the war, further compounding the issue. The rapid German retreat after the failed attack, described in American reports as disheartened by the lack of progress, suggests that the troops were demoralized and unlikely to document what they considered a humiliating tactical defeat. Operational documents identify the specific German units participating in the battle. The main attacking force consisted of the 2nd Mountain Division, reinforced by elements of the 708th Volksgrenadier Division and the 285th Assault Gun Battalion. It is important to note that these were elite troops, especially the mountain infantry, battle-hardened and highly experienced in combat. This fact made their defeat at the hands of a single American soldier even more disheartening and contrary to German tactical expectations. The war diary of the 2nd Mountain Division for January 26 contains only a terse entry: attack on American positions in the Holzwehr area repulsed with heavy losses. Enemy resistance proved stronger than anticipated. This brief statement hardly conveys the confusion that must have reigned in the German ranks. Elite mountain infantry, veterans of Norway, Finland, and the Eastern Front, encountered something unprecedented. A warrior who seemed to know no fear, no fatigue, and no basic instinct for self-preservation. After the war, German military analysts included this battle in their 1965 study, Verteidigung gegen Übermacht, Defense against Superior Forces. The study identified several key factors contributing to the German defeat: overconfidence stemming from numerical superiority, tactical rigidity that emerged after the initial assault failed, and insufficient inter-service coordination, where tanks and infantry failed to properly synchronize their actions. After suffering these losses, German forces abandoned all attempts to assault Company B's positions and, under cover of darkness, completely withdrew from that sector of the front. This sudden retreat by elite mountain infantry, transferred from Norway and accustomed to 4 years without retreat, occurred without orders from higher command. The decisive factor was the psychological shock that their advance had been halted by the actions of just one American soldier, proving more impactful than the physical casualties sustained. Murphy's courage at Holzwehr had far-reaching consequences beyond tactical success. Due to the successful defense, the 3rd Infantry Division was able to hold the strategically vital Bois de Riedwehr forest, which controlled the approaches to Holzwehr. The failure of the German offensive sealed the fate of the Colmar pocket. The very next day, January 27, 1945, Holzwihr was liberated by the 30th Infantry Regiment. Within weeks, the German bridgehead west of the Rhine was completely eliminated, resulting in the incapacitation of 50,000 German soldiers and allowing the Allies to launch their final assault on Germany. This battle vividly demonstrated that even elite German units could no longer break the determined resistance of American forces, despite numerical superiority. Military experts highly praised the American soldiers' contribution to the battle's outcome. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, who commanded the French First Army, emphasized that the defense of the approaches to Holzwihr by the 3rd U.S. Earth Division, and especially Lieutenant Murphy's heroism, became a turning point that broke the resistance of German forces in Alsace. The lessons learned from this engagement, particularly the effective use of artillery and automatic weapons in defense, significantly influenced American army tactics in subsequent operations of the European campaign. In recognition of the 3rd Infantry Division's merits, France honored it with the right to wear the French Croix de Guerre in 2000. A memorial was erected at the site of the fierce fighting to commemorate the American hero who contributed to the liberation of France. The official description of Murphy's valor, detailed in the Medal of Honor citation presented by Lieutenant General Alexander Patch on June 2, 1945, formally confirms his outstanding achievements. Despite the restrained language typical of military documents, the citation text reflects Murphy's exceptional heroism. Alone and facing the enemy on 3 sides, he killed dozens of German soldiers, breaking their attack. For an hour, German forces desperately tried to destroy 2nd Lieutenant Murphy, using every means at their disposal, yet he steadfastly held his position. The award ceremony, held near Salzburg, Austria, gathered the surviving soldiers of the 3rd Infantry Division to witness their comrade receive the nation's highest military honor. Brigadier General Ralph B. Löwit and Lieutenant Colonel Howlett D. Edson, who recommended Murphy for the award, emphasized that his courageous actions saved Company B from certain annihilation and allowed the division to hold a strategically vital area. Murphy's humility and his reluctance to acknowledge his actions as heroic remained constant throughout his life. When asked what prompted him to climb onto the burning tank destroyer, he replied with characteristic directness, "They were killing my friends. It wasn't a heroic act. I thought if one man could handle the job, why risk others?" Murphy's post-war struggle with what was then called combat fatigue and is now known as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, makes his story particularly relevant to a modern understanding of the psychological consequences of war. He suffered from chronic insomnia, tormenting nightmares, and hypervigilance, leading him to sleep with a loaded pistol under his pillow. Eventually, he preferred to sleep in his garage with the lights on, unable to tolerate the darkness that reminded him of night battles. "I remember the experience as if it were a nightmare. A demon seemed to have entered my body," Murphy wrote of his wartime experiences. His openness in discussing these difficulties led to the passage of legislation establishing the ODL, Murphy Memorial Veterans Hospital in San Antonio, in 1973, 2 years after his tragic death in a plane crash at the age of 45. Murphy's first marriage to Wanda Hendricks, unfortunately, was short-lived, lasting only 16 months. The severe manifestations of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that the war hero suffered were the cause. According to Hendricks, it was as if two different people coexisted in their life together. By day he was a courteous, cheerful and generous man, but at night his personality changed dramatically. He relentlessly patrolled the house with a loaded weapon in hand and preferred to sleep in the garage with bright lights on, as darkness awakened memories of night patrols on the front lines. Despite his own internal torments, Murphy was one of the first to speak out in defense of veterans facing combat-related psychological trauma. In 1966, he shared his experiences in the Saturday Evening Post. "I don't remember a time when I wasn't tormented by nightmares. They became an integral part of my life, like breathing itself. But I was lucky enough to afford qualified medical care, medication, and psychotherapy. What about the veterans who don't have that opportunity? What awaits the thousands of soldiers returning from Vietnam with similar problems?" It is also important to remember that the effectiveness of Murphy's actions at Holzwihr was largely determined by the powerful weaponry he utilized. The M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun, designed by the brilliant John Browning back in 1918, was rightly considered one of the best heavy machine guns of World War II. Its .50 BMG round had incredible penetrating power, piercing 1-inch armor at 100 yards. Each hit from such a bullet had a devastating effect on enemy personnel. With muscle energy exceeding 13,000 foot-pounds, the bullet could literally tear a human body apart. The M10 tank destroyer, in turn, carried 51 3-inch shells, 1,000 .50 caliber rounds, and 300 gallons of gasoline. When a German 80-tail Pemitis shell struck the vehicle, the fuel instantly ignited, causing a fire that reached over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The fact that the vehicle continued to burn for over an hour without a massive explosion can be considered a true miracle. Murphy was essentially on a bomb with a lit fuse. Equally important was the artillery support that Murphy skillfully directed. 105mm howitzers were capable of sending 33-pound high explosive shells over 11,000 meters. Each such shell created a shrapnel radius of 50 meters, posing a lethal threat up to 200 meters away. Murphy's ability to direct artillery fire just 50 yards from his own position, dangerously close by any measure, significantly amplified his combat power. Military circles meticulously analyzed Audie Murphy's chances of survival in the inferno of Holzwihr. Against one American soldier, a formidable German armada was deployed. 250 infantrymen armed with rifles and machine guns, and 6 tanks spewing fire from their main guns and coaxial machine guns. Within an hour, Murphy's position was barraged by 10,000 shells and rounds. Even accounting for firing inaccuracy due to distance and the smoke screen enveloping Murphy, statistical calculations indicated he should have sustained 15 to 20 hits. Operating the M2 Browning heavy machine gun under those conditions demanded superhuman endurance. The weapon weighed nearly 40 kilograms, approximately 88 pounds, and had immense recoil. Murphy had to maintain balance on the burning vehicle, absorbing the fierce recoil while under continuous fire from 3 sides. The acrid smoke from the fire made breathing and aiming difficult. Military experts and psychologists still cannot agree on what enabled Murphy to accomplish this unparalleled feat. Did his impoverished childhood, which taught him to survive at all costs, play a role? His hunting skills, which made killing a natural act? Or did he simply find himself in the right place at the inferno of battle? Dr. Dave Grossman, author of On Killing and a recognized expert in military psychology, offers his perspective. Many factors converged perfectly in Murphy. He possessed technical skills honed through hunting, motivation born from poverty, emotional detachment resulting from early psychological trauma, and, most importantly, an instinct to protect his comrades that was stronger than the fear of death. Murphy's actions vividly demonstrate his selflessness and bravery, as confirmed by his own words. When asked about his reasons for climbing onto the burning tank destroyer, he consistently replied, "They were killing my men." This personal motivation reveals the true course of his actions. It was not about strategic maneuvers, but about defending the soldiers entrusted to him. Murphy himself admitted how the war had changed him. In a 1968 interview, shortly before his death, he shared, "People consider that day heroic. Maybe it was, but then I became numb. I became a killing machine, feeling neither fear nor anger, only a cold determination to destroy." Audie Murphy's combat record remains unparalleled in American military history. He was awarded every possible valor award, some of them multiple times. His impressive list of 33 decorations includes the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and 5 awards from France and Belgium. However, Murphy's true legacy extends far beyond the medals he received. His active advocacy for veterans' mental health was decades ahead of its time. The Audie Murphy Memorial Veterans Hospital specializes in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other combat-related psychological traumas. His autobiography, To Hell and Back, helped countless veterans realize they were not alone in their experiences. Audie Murphy's story is firmly etched in the annals of American military history, becoming a symbol of exceptional bravery and selflessness. The U.S. Army Infantry School, which trains future commanders, meticulously analyzes his feat at Holtzwihr, viewing his actions as a benchmark for defensive tactics, leadership in extreme conditions, and effective utilization of Allied forces. The Audie Murphy Club, uniting outstanding sergeants and senior enlisted personnel, serves as a platform for developing leadership qualities inspired by Murphy's example. Master Sergeant Ronald Johnson, who heads the club's Fort Hood chapter, emphasizes the enduring relevance of Murphy's heroism, noting that every new generation of soldiers needs heroes, examples of courage that prove ordinary people are capable of incredible acts in critical situations. Murphy, according to Johnson, vividly demonstrates that heroism does not require outstanding physical attributes or coming from the military family. It simply requires genuine care for one's comrades and a willingness to prioritize their well-being above one's own. In professional military circles, discussions often arise about the possibility of replicating Murphy's feat in modern warfare. Technological advancements have undoubtedly brought radical changes to combat operations. Satellite communications, unmanned aerial vehicles, and precision-guided weapons have created a transparent battlefield where, it would seem, there is no room for individual heroism. However, the experience of recent military conflicts, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq, suggests otherwise. American soldiers have repeatedly demonstrated exceptional bravery and selflessness, performing acts comparable to Murphy's, such as Staff Sergeant David Belavia's urban combat in Fallujah and First Sergeant Paul Smith's self-sacrificing defense of a machine gun position in Baghdad. All these examples echo Murphy's readiness to confront superior enemy forces. General Stanley McChrystal, former commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, is convinced that technological progress certainly changes the nature of war, but does not affect its essence. War, in his view, remains a contest of human wills. Murphy's stand at Holzwihr, his willingness to say, "They shall not pass," against all odds, stands as a timeless example of courage and selflessness within the US. Army's Maneuver Center of Excellence, Murphy's combat tactics are studied as a combination of critical principles: the strategic importance of position selection, coordination of firepower, and psychological impact on the enemy. Murphy understood that the physical elimination of enemy soldiers was only part of the task. His goal was to break their fighting spirit. His relentless and precise fire instilled in German soldiers the certainty of imminent death if they attempted to advance. While the world lauded Murphy as America's most decorated soldier, this Texas native waged another hidden war, a battle against the internal demons that haunted him after returning from the front. The man who had not flinched in the face of danger on a burning tank destroyer experienced genuine terror of the darkness that had taken root in his mind. Pamela Murphy, the hero's widow, who married him in 1951 and remained by his side until his death in 1971, shared intimate memories. Audie carried invisible wounds that never truly healed. He would wake up in a cold sweat, screaming, reliving events from 20 years ago. But he never stopped trying to help his fellow veterans just like himself. The war didn't end for Audie with the signing of the peace treaty. He managed to transform his pain into a noble purpose. This transformation of personal trauma into active advocacy led to positive societal changes. Murphy's open discussion of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, contributed to the recognition of combat stress as a legitimate medical condition requiring qualified help, rather than a sign of weakness or cowardice. His efforts helped thousands of veterans seek the necessary support they might have been hesitant to ask for. January 26, 1945, was the day Second Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy showed the world an example of incredible courage, single-handedly stopping the onslaught of an enemy army at Holzwihr. His heroic act shattered Nazi myths about the weakness and softness of American soldiers. Contrary to propaganda, they faced not spoiled boys, but sons of farmers and laborers hardened by the Great Depression, whose spiritual resilience could rival the greatest warriors in history, ready to do anything to protect their comrades. The eloquent silence in German archives about that day speaks volumes. Their inability to comprehend and explain what happened became for them the deepest form of defeat. Not only tactical and physical, but also psychological and moral. They encountered someone who surpassed them in the art of war, and this realization dealt a devastating blow to their military identity. Today, the fields near Holzwihr have once again become peaceful agricultural lands. The wounds of war have healed, shell craters filled, and blood washed away by decades of rain. However, every year on January 26th, a modest ceremony takes place at the memorial erected at the site of Murphy's heroism. French citizens, American veterans, and sometimes elderly Germans gather to honor the day when one American soldier proved the boundless extent of human courage. Audie Murphy's story reminds us that heroism isn't the absence of fear. By his own admission, Murphy was gripped by terror. But heroism is the ability to act despite fear when others depend on you. It's the resolve to stand firm when retreat seems the easier path. It's the capacity to transcend oneself in a decisive moment. This is why the Germans were astonished when one American soldier single-handedly held off an assault by 250 enemies for over an hour. They encountered a phenomenon that defied military science, against which tactical doctrine was powerless, and which overwhelming force could not break. The invincible human spirit, embodied in a 110-pound Texan, willing to sacrifice himself to prevent the deaths of his friends. Murphy's valor at Holzwihr forever stands as a testament to how one person, in the right place, at the right time, and with the right motivation, can alter the course of history. The boy who once hunted rabbits to feed his family transformed into a hero who halted an army to save his comrades. It is this transformation of an ordinary individual into an extraordinary one, both in war and in life, that remains the most striking truth.